All right. Hello, everyone. Like Amy said, one of the things that we keep hearing questions about is production insurance, especially during this crazy time we're all in. And so thanks to Tony, he connected us with the lovely Greg, who just joined us. He did a similar Q&A session with the DGA, and we invited him to talk with this group, and he was willing to share his knowledge. And so we're very excited to pick his brain a little bit. I have a list of questions I'm gonna go over with Greg that hopefully cover the general questions that we've been hearing. And then afterwards, if you guys have more specific questions, we can get into a little more of a Q&A discussion type thing. But Greg, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Kendra.
Yeah, this is our little Washingtonian group that I told you about, and we're all very excited you're here. So if you just wanna, first off, just introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Jones. I'm the Senior Vice President at an insurance brokerage firm by the name of Momentous Insurance Brokerage. I run the film and TV division there, and my primary job and the job of our department is to provide production insurance for independent production companies. I personally have been involved in the insurance business since the late 1970s. I've been an insurance broker and focused on entertainment since 1983. So been around the block once, twice, have seen some things, certainly nothing like COVID, but the experience from the past is turning out to be beneficial in the present.
Great, yeah. So I guess my first question kind of goes into that, like what does your world look like right now? What are the biggest concerns? I know it's an unprecedented time, but what is going on in the world of insurance?
Well, perhaps a little bit of clarification on my end before I start to talk too.
Yes.
We're an insurance brokerage firm, and so as such, I'm an insurance broker. Now, a lot of the time people get insurance brokers and insurance agents confused, and I'd like to just sort of elaborate on the distinction between the two before I start answering questions. If you go to an insurance agent, they usually work for one insurance company. Anything that you want to buy relative to insurance is going to be a product from said insurance company. So, for example, if you want homeowners insurance or auto insurance from Allstate, you talk to an Allstate agent. That person would give you a list of Allstate products, and their interest for the most part would be aligned with the insurance company because their job is to sell you Allstate products. An insurance broker is a little bit different in that what we do is we align our interests with yours. We represent you, and we have the ability to go to different insurance companies and have them compete for your business. And at the end of the day, we make sure that they give us as close as possible to what you want, as close as possible to the price that you want it for. We do not align ourselves with the insurance companies. While the insurance company may not be the enemy per se, we're not on their side. Let me just put it that way. When it comes down to it, we know which side our bread is buttered on. So when I talk a little bit about the concerns of the industry, I speak really as a broker, not as an employee of an insurance company. I can tell you what we've been doing is having a lot of dialogue, not just with clients, obviously, and answering their questions, but also trying to find out almost on a daily basis what direction production insurance is going in. For all of the years that I've been doing this, there's always been at least 4 or 5 different companies that would be willing to write production insurance, sometimes 6 or 7, rarely no more than that. But lately, we've gotten down to really only one insurance company that's willing to write production insurance today and going forward. That's Allianz. I don't know if any of you have any experience with them or not. They've been around a long time. They bought Fineman's Fund years ago, and Fineman's Fund had been the preeminent production insurance provider for years. So anyway, what they're doing and what they're telling us, as are some of the other insurance companies who have put a freeze on insurance right now, is that one, they exist on modeling. Everything that they do is a function of determining how much risk they're taking on and what to charge for it. The problem that they've run into with COVID is that so many different industries have been hit at the same time that they're having difficulty modeling exactly how much they should charge going forward to adequately have enough money to pay claims. And Allianz right now is working kind of on several different levels. They had a lot of claims since they do most of the production insurance around the world, frankly. And so what they're doing right now is trying to pay the claims that they're supposed to pay. They're trying to avoid litigation, frankly, at all costs. So that's actually a good thing for people who have policies with them. The second thing they're trying to do is when they pay those claims, it takes down the reserves that they typically set up on claims. Anytime you get a claim in the insurance industry, they don't know exactly what they're going to wind up paying. So they set aside a chunk of money called a reserve to determine X amount of money that needs to be put to the side. Once that amount is usually higher than the actual amount that they spend. Once that amount is taken down, once they've actually paid the claim, now it becomes, instead of a speculative amount, it's a finite amount. And as such, then they can better model how much money they're paying out in claims and then determine how much they need to charge going forward for COVID-related exposures. So right now, that's what they're focusing on. And they're getting closer every day because, as I said, they're paying more and more claims. Us as insurance brokers are actively seeking to find other markets, other opportunities for insureds. One of the things that Allianz isn't doing is, although they're writing new productions, they're not providing any COVID-related coverage. They have an endorsement to their policies that excludes the coverage. So we're out trying to really fill those holes. You know, we're going to London, we're going to other markets locally, and just trying to find a way and being creative to fill those gaps. So their concerns are a little bit different from ours, but at the same time, we have to be sensitive to their concerns so that we can move forward.
Yeah, so do you think there will ever be a future, or how soon will there be a future where companies will start covering COVID claims, or is that even in our future?
Yeah, it's in the future. I think the Fireman's Fund and subsequently Allianz and other companies have been doing this for a long time now. And I think, frankly, they've done quite well. And they don't want to give that up. I just think they're trying to get a handle now on exactly what to charge people for the coverage. And I think as soon as they're able to do that, they'll start offering coverage. They answer to another set of companies called reinsurers. Now, reinsurance companies are, frankly, companies that insure insurance companies. They get to lay off some of their risk. So once these claims are paid, the reinsurers will then tell the insurance companies how much they're going to charge them to take on risk. And once they do that, they'll pass those costs along in the form of premiums to clients. I think that they feel very strongly about insurance relative to production. They've staked claims in it. The 5 or 6 companies that have been doing it historically have been around for a long time. And I think they're anxious to get back in the game.
Great. Stepping back a bit, just like more basics for people like me who don't have that much experience with production insurance. What are typical situations that production insurance would cover, I guess, pre-COVID, and also, I guess, during now, if that's an option?
Pre-COVID, what we would normally do is no one policy provides all of the coverage that a production needs. So what we would normally do is put together what we would typically call an insurance portfolio. Much like if you're an investor, you buy stocks and bonds and securities and you have a certain asset mix. With us, one of the things that we do is we put together a series of policies, none of which overlap in coverage, that will take on the majority of the exposure that a producer typically faces. The biggest volatility, I think, relative to an insurance portfolio is cast insurance. You build sometimes your entire project around the talent that you hire. And if something happens to that talent, you may not have a movie. Particularly if you're in a situation where you're going out and pre-sold a movie maybe to a foreign sales agent. So cast insurance provides coverage if one of those people gets sick or injured or in a worst case scenario dies. all of the policies sort of have a time element coverage to them because, you know, when you make a movie or you do a show, you've got a group of people together for a finite amount of time. And if one of the actors goes down, you've still got 70 other people that need to get paid. And you haven't really contemplated that in your budget. Insurance is really what steps up to pay for that. But by far, the biggest claims are the ones where actors go down. And with COVID, what's happening is that the Allianz is willing to provide insurance, but not COVID-related cast coverage. So we're going out and we're replacing that right now with certain clients with death and disability policies, for example, written on a short-term basis, since you don't really need to pay an annual premium for an exposure that you're really only going to have for maybe 8 weeks or so.
Okay. So what I'm getting is that currently there's no insurance policies or carriers that are really covering COVID. So if for some reason, if someone needs to go forward and film something and they get denied that insurance coverage, can they accept the potential risk and continue to go uninsured? Or, I mean, obviously that's not a good idea, but what in these scenarios, what are we thinking as solutions for that? I don't know. I know it's kind of a weird time.
Well, I wouldn't recommend trying to do something without insurance. You know, I'm not sure that your individual investors would allow you to do that anyway. They might push back on that a little bit because there'd be no recourse. And even if you went to a bank, the banks wouldn't allow you to do it. And ultimately, if it was a big enough project where you needed a completion bond, for sure the completion bond company wouldn't let you do it. So what we're doing is trying to determine through dialogue with, say, completion bond companies, some agreement on how much less they're willing to accept and still provide completion bonds to production companies that allow them to get financing. For example, under normal circumstances pre-COVID, if you were doing, say, a movie that had a budget of $10 million, you'd buy an insurance portfolio, and one of the things that would be covered would be cast insurance, and it would be for the full limits of the budget. Now, because of COVID, nobody really wants to put out full limits, right? Allianz doesn't want to do it. Other companies don't want to do it. And the cost to try to do that, if you went out to the market to, say, get some sort of a buyback policy, is prohibitive, frankly. It would blow your budget right out of the water. So what we're doing is we're talking to the bond company and we're saying, look, we know this is a $10 million production, but if the production company can demonstrate to you that $10 million being X, that there's a way that they can mitigate costs, pre-mitigate costs in some cases, so that if you do have a claim, the claim is something below X, can you work with that? And if they can do that, then you're in a position to free up capital to make the picture. So, you know, we're just trying to use any and all means to find ways to plug the holes that have now been developed in insurance policies because of COVID.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure that's a big undertaking for everyone. So I don't know if you have an answer to this, but as we go forward, if, you know, carriers are starting to consider offering certain things, what sort of protocols do you think will have to be in place on productions to get covered? Like, is there going to be requirements for safety plans or following, you know, state guidelines? Is that been discussed at all yet?
Yes, but in sort of broad strokes. I think that when you start talking about safety, it really starts with the unions. You know, the people that you hire are going to be signatory, are going to be members of certain unions. You've got the Teamsters, you've got the DGA, you've got SAG, you've got all these different people or unions that you have to get people from. And the protocols that need to be established are ones that they can sign off on so that they can release the talent. So the insurance companies, I think, will follow that lead. I don't think they're particularly anxious to start to lay down the law when it comes to what you should and shouldn't be doing as far as health safety on a set. I think their feeling is if they start giving direction on anything relative to that, that they'd pick up some unnecessary or unwanted liability. So they've been kind of steering clear of that for the time being. Their attitude seems to be, if it's okay with the unions, it's okay with us.
Great. Okay. Thank you. again, I don't know if you have an answer for this, but do you know how state workers' comp claims intersect with production insurance? So if a crew member does get sick, you know, what's covered by workers' compensation or production insurance, and how does that work at all together, or is that completely separate?
They're separate. The workers' comp piece usually is taken care of by payroll services. Most production companies will sign on with a payroll service, not just to issue checks, but to take on the work comp aspect so they can be the employer of record. So for the most part, they would take on that exposure. We really wouldn't necessarily get involved. We might write some sort of a small catch-all workers' comp policy just to make sure that you're dotting I's and crossing T's if you formed a separate entity to do a production. Because in California, for example, state law requires that if you set up a corporation and you have a federal ID number issued, that you have workers' compensation insurance. Even if it's a circumstance where you're having everybody paid by a payroll service. So we'll set up, say, a catch-all for maybe catching people or covering people who might be interns or somebody that you just are using as a day player or something. You know, you want to make sure at the end of the day that you plug that hole. I would say that outside of that, on the production insurance side, cast insurance, the crews that are sometimes, or the people that sometimes fall outside of the scope of the payroll service will be covered. But for the most part, we steer clear of workers' comp. I know in the state of Washington, it's what's called a monopolistic state. So you can't even buy insurance from a private insurer. You'd have to go through the state.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I kind of want to open it up to everyone now. I mean, we kind of went over my big general hits. If you guys want to start picking Greg's brain, I would love to see what you guys are thinking and the type of issues and questions that you have coming up. Anyone?
No takers.
I know.
No, hey, Greg. My name's
There we go.
Mark. I'm a
Hey,
line
Mark.
producer, UPM from Spokane. Hey, so we're currently in this environment. We're still doing a lot of budgets, still talking to a lot of projects. You know, producers that want to do a project, they want to shoot here this fall, they want to shoot next spring. They don't know when they're going to shoot. You know, it's all up in the air. But as I'm budgeting, you know, typically if I'm doing a $2 to $5 million movie, I typically budget 1% for insurance pre-COVID. What's now, if we're down to just Fireman's Fund currently providing, and maybe we got to wait a little while before a couple of other companies come back around. What in your best guess, what should I be budgeting now for insurance? Just non-COVID insurance, just straight up production insurance. And then I guess we extend the question, if the way to cover cast for COVID is a short-term death and disability policy, what kind of ranges, what kind of numbers should we, percentage-wise, should we be looking at that?
I'd say that the production insurance policies that are currently being provided are somewhere around the same price as it was pre-COVID. The difference, obviously, is you're paying the same price for less than what you were getting pre-COVID. To fill that gap, if you wanted to buy some sort of a policy for a couple of months, a death and disability policy for, I'd say even a B-list actor, forget A-list, but even a B-list actor, you're probably talking about somewhere about 8 to 10% of whatever limit that you would want. So again, you know, if you were doing a $5 million movie, I'm not sure you want to buy $5 million worth of coverage if it was going to cost you $500,000 at 10%. So the idea would be to sort of carve it out, figure out exactly who it is. Obviously, health is a factor. If it's somebody that's young and not in a high risk category, cost you a little bit less, maybe I want to say 5%, but it's pretty pricey. So overall, 1% for production insurance, and then maybe some percentage, like I would say 5% if you're going to do buyback coverage on a couple of people. You'll have to be very careful now who you cast. I even hate to say that in this format, but quite frankly, there will be people that will be tougher to insure than others. Actors who are older, fall into a higher risk category at this point in time. All of these actors, I should say, by the way, the key ones have to take what's called CAST exams. They're brief medical examinations that make sure that the person that you're hired is healthy enough to do the job. And it's going to be harder to get those people approved. So it's unfortunate, but this is now a factor that you're going to have to consider, at least in the short term. If you've got a cast that's young and healthy, you're probably going to have a better chance of getting some sort of COVID coverage than you will for, somebody who's 75 years old.
I have a question. So when I do budgets, oftentimes I'm doing completion bonds. We'll put a completion bond on a show. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to approach? Has anybody thought about approaching the insurance in a similar sort of way, so that you establish a premium, but it's based on whether or not the insurance is actually used. So how if the film if the completion bond takes the film back, then they charge you the full premium. If they don't, then it's a lesser premium. So is there some way of maybe managing insurance in a similar sort of way, so that you say, okay, look, if you have a reserve fund for your insurance, right, for the talent and for your director. If we use it, then the premium is going to be $500,000. If we don't use it, then the premium is going to be $5,000. Is that anything that's been discussed?
No, it hasn't. It's not a bad idea, but off the top of my head, I would think that no matter what, the insurance company is going to want a certain amount of minimum money in order to provide the insurance. And the rest of it would be, it sounds to me like what you're saying, on deposit, if you will. We keep the deposit. If you have claims, we give it back if you don't. Years ago, the bond companies used to work that way. It's been quite a while, but I remember a time when the bond companies used to charge you 6%, and they give you 3% back. They give you 3 points back if you didn't have any claims. I guess they call it, no claims bonus or something. Some insurance companies used to work that way, where they would charge a little bit more, but they didn't do it on a case-by-case basis or project-by-project basis. They would do it on a slate of films, so they could spread their risk out a little bit more. But it's an interesting concept.
Thank you.
I see Rick's hand.
Hey, Greg. I'm Rick Deskin. I'm with SAG-AFTRA.
Hey, Rick.
To my knowledge, a few months ago, SAG-AFTRA said that members should not sign liability waivers. And as far as I'm aware, that's also true with the DGA. What is your opinion on liability waivers?
Don't sign them. I don't even know. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't even know if legally that would fly. Whether or not a person would have the right to waive liability of an employer. Again, I'm not sure because I'm not an attorney, but I would say they're likely not going to sign those, which puts more pressure on the insurance, obviously. You got to make sure that if as a production you're taking on that risk, that you can transfer some part of it, if not all of it, to an insurance company.
And I do want to mention, that's a great question, Rick. I do want to mention our next series, sort of in this Q&A Zoom. We will be talking with a lawyer, like Amy said, and we will be talking about all of that. So hopefully we'll be able to dig a little bit more into that in the next couple weeks.
Thank you, Kendra.
Other questions for Greg?
Greg, I'll jump in again. It's Mark. I had a discussion, I don't know, a couple days ago with somebody that said they thought that there was, they didn't know the insurance company, they didn't know many details, but they thought they had heard, sort of like somebody told them that somebody told them that somebody told them that there was an insurance company out there writing COVID insurance. $2 million available, a cap of $2 million for 10%, for $200,000. You mentioned earlier there's nobody writing COVID insurance right now. Have you heard any scenario in play?
Yeah, the insurance companies that would typically do production insurance, Chubb, Allianz, Hiscox, One Beacon, are not offering COVID. And again, Allianz is the only one that's offering a production portfolio, if you will, even without COVID. There is a company out there now, several of them actually, who said that they can go as an agent to Lloyd's of London. And through Lloyd's of London, you could buy COVID buyback coverage. And what they're talking about specifically, I think, is cast insurance, Mark. So if normally an actor got sick and it turned out that they had COVID or some sort of, if you had COVID and you had the coverage, you wouldn't have to worry about that as a producer. The insurance company would pay the bills and they'd pay any extra amount of expense that you ran into because the actor got sick. Now, they're not providing that. They're carving that out. So you would have to go out to a company and buy that part back. You would take whatever they take out, buy from another company. It would make your portfolio whole again. There are a couple of companies that say that they have Lloyd's slips, that they have access to Lloyd's, and through Lloyd's, they can get enough people's signatory on a policy, usually no more than, say, $3 million, at about 10% of the limit that you want. So if you're buying $1 million worth of coverage and you were covering, say, 2 or 3 people, it costs you about $100,000.
Greg, I know you don't have a magic crystal ball, but if you had to guess sort of a timeline in which COVID coverage per se would start to be available, do you have any inkling at all what that would look like?
If I had to make an educated guess, I would say somewhere around the 4th quarter of the year, so maybe September, October. I think insurance companies tend to think in quarters. Some think monthly, I guess, but most of the time it's quarters. I think that they're going to have to finish paying claims and figure out on the productions that they had at the time that COVID hit, and we had all these shutdowns, what that's going to how that's going to affect things. And then I think once they get a handle on those costs, then they'll be able to start offering the coverage, probably at a higher price, but certainly a lot less than the 10% that people are charging now. So I would say October, the earliest.
Great, thank you.
Quick question. This is Melissa. I'm business agent for IATSE 48 here in the Northwest. Just a quick question, because I keep hearing people talk about, to clarify, there is currently insurance available. It's just that it's at a high cost and only one company is providing it, correct? Versus in the 4th quarter, hopefully, perhaps, there will be more companies, or am I misunderstanding you?
Nope, that's it. Right now, there's one company doing it, and the ones that stepped away, I'm hoping will step back by the 4th quarter.
Excellent, thank you. And then just to go back to the workman's comp, as far as, I think this has been some of the conversations, just of individuals and obviously outside the film industry as well. If everybody is following all safety protocols and somebody still gets sick on their job, is that something that one would presume workman's comp is going to take care of, or is that something that you have knowledge of?
I presume workman's comp. Here in California, I think that's the law, that if somebody has workman's comp and they get sick, got to pay the medical bills and salary too. They're pretty strict about it here. Washington State, again, being monopolistic, you have to buy the insurance through the state, but I can't imagine that the state would have rules that would be more restrictive or wouldn't provide what any other state in the country would provide. I don't see them shorting people in the state of Washington.
Thank you for that. And then in turn, what is that going to be? And this is, again, the question for all kinds of industries, I think, is how is it proven, right, that the person got sick on the job when all safety cases were I mean, does that become a litigation situation with workman's comp, or, I mean, any speculation on that?
I think by and large, the insurance companies don't have a lot of an appetite for litigation. So I would think that in most cases, if the circumstance typically would fall under workers' comp pre-COVID, then during COVID, it would be the same thing. So I would think that by and large, the insurance companies would be prepared to pay work comp claims rather than fight them. But you know, again, you have to take into consideration that there might be, you know, a little bit of hanky-panky going on. There's always some degree of insurance fraud, and perhaps they might be a little more aggressive in trying to ferret that out. But you're right, Melissa. I mean, how do you tell really? We're going through that right now. I've been working from home the last few months, and I'm scheduled to go back into the office in a couple of weeks. And I'm a little bit nervous about it, frankly, because being at home, I can control my environment and the people that come in and out of it. At work, I can't do that. And I'm in a bit of a high-risk group, so if I get sick, that's liability that my employer is going to have to take on.
I liked that last line. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
But not to poke the bear here, but Greg, to continue your analogy, you're worried about going to work, and the employer takes on the liability of you getting sick. But likewise, if you're not responsible, if you're at home having parties and being crazy, and you bring the illness to work, why are you not liable to the employer for bringing that disease to work? See, I mean, it goes both ways.
Sure.
If you're, you know, if we on set are behaving and doing all the protocols correctly, and we have everything buttoned down, and we've got everything exactly the way it's supposed to be, and at wrap, crew member goes and has a couple beers and hangs out with their buddies and gets sick off set at night, why is production responsible?
I think that when you employ people for production, the way work comp looks at it is a 24-hour occupation. So if you've got a production going on, and I'll give you an example. I had a circumstance where an actor was working, an A-list actor was working. When production had wrapped for the day, he was in the hotel, this is on location, in the hotel bar, and kind of horsing around with some stunt guys, and he got hurt. And he broke his leg, and he couldn't work for like 6 weeks. And at the end of the day, even though that wouldn't necessarily be the kind of behavior you'd want an employee to engage in, production was liable because he was on the job. So the production policies wound up paying for that circumstance in every aspect of it. The cast insurance piece, the benefits piece, they had to step up.
Any more questions for Greg while we have him here?
Hi, Greg. My name is Vicky Bergland, Davenport. I'm a 174 Teamster location manager in Seattle, Washington. And I've been on a number of different phone calls over the past month, with one specifically earlier this week that was an international call. So a lot of countries and a lot of states are claiming that they're opening and starting up into July and August. So is this one insurance company, and specifically yourself, crazy busy right now because of that? Or can you give some insight there? Thank you.
I don't know. As you all probably know, the U.S. hasn't, at least it's perceived that we haven't done the best job of dealing with this particular situation. Other countries seem to have been able to do it better, and as a result, the laws or the I guess the protocols in those countries are different than they are here. there may be circumstances where insurance companies, Allianz or anybody else that typically does insurance, is more willing to provide insurance in a country that is dealing with the coronavirus better than productions that take place in the United States. One of the concerns I have is I have a client, for example, that's going to be doing a film in Hungary, and we're worried about the circumstance where other countries say, because we're not doing what they think we should be doing to deal with coronavirus, that they're not going to let Americans in the country. Then what do you do? So I guess to answer your question, I would imagine that other countries are dealing with this in their own way. I had heard recently, and I haven't proven it, I don't have any proof of this, that France has set up a little fund that was to deal specifically with coronavirus-related claims, a little pool of money. So years ago, when we had a 9/11 and nobody wanted to provide terrorism coverage, the government here had stepped in, and they did something similar to that. There was a law passed. It was called the TRIA law, the Terrorism Recovery Insurance Act. There's now legislation locally here, locally being the U.S., for something called PRIA, the Pandemic Recovery Insurance Act. But you know, these things take time, and in the meantime, people need to do what they need to do. So I think that it might make sense to take a look at what's going on in other countries that might be a little more lenient. I have a client in Bulgaria, for example. They're working. They've got protocols established at the studios. They've got actors there doing what they need to do, and it's not nearly as restrictive to work in any industry, but particularly production, as it is, say, here.
Okay, any final questions for Greg before we wrap it up?
I actually have just a follow-up on that last one, Greg. It's Eugene Mazzola up in Seattle.
Hi, Jane.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused. If they're working in Bulgaria or wherever this company is, right? What are they doing for production insurance?
They have it.
But so they have the traditional production insurance with the talent and everybody being covered?
Well, they have a sublimit on certain coverages that were acceptable to the bond company. Now, I should qualify that because in the case that I referred to, this company had actually started the production prior to the COVID shutdown. And so they were able to come back quicker because they were in Bulgaria. But we had also negotiated some coverage for them prior to this circumstance. So that coverage stayed in place. They couldn't alter or change the policy. But I'm pretty confident that what we wound up putting together before COVID hit, we could have put together now, because there were sublimits even then that the insurance companies imposed that the bond company was willing to accept. So I think that each production has its own characteristics. Different people, different actors, different kind of a production. And it's our job as brokers to go out, represent you, and tell the story of the production in such a way that it makes it more palatable for the insurance company to take on as much of your risk as you can possibly transfer. So because each situation is unique, we just try to craft the story. We don't lie, obviously, we don't misrepresent, but you just try to craft the story of the production in such a way that the insurance company feels like the risk is being managed to the point that they can take it on. And you can do that with the insurance companies, and a lot of the time you can do it with the bond companies as well.
So are you saying then, am I understanding this correctly, that I have a production of $5 million independent film, and I need insurance, and I can talk to the insurance company about getting COVID insurance on a $5 million film if I meet all the protocols? Can I do that in the United States? I mean, are you saying you can do it in Bulgaria, but you can't do it in the United States?
No, I'm saying it would be harder to do in the United States than it would be in Bulgaria, because in Bulgaria, they've done a little better job of dealing with the COVID crisis. Here in the States, on a $5 million production, you could approach Allianz and you could probably, depending upon the circumstances, get them to be open to a dialogue of providing a limit, not necessarily 5 million, but a limit that might be agreeable to the bond company if in fact you're getting a completion bond.
So
That's doable.
so it's really tying the two together, a completion bond and the insurance, to be able to get the film fully funded. I mean, you need both.
Well,
You need both. I mean, if I don't have a completion bond, if I'm self-funded, I don't have a completion bond.
if you don't have a completion bond and your financier is insisting that you buy insurance to protect their financial interest, then it's not impossible to work something out. But again, it would depend on the circumstances. You know, obviously, a production that was in a controlled environment, mostly on set, with young actors, with a short schedule, you might have a better chance than, say, a piece that had more action and older people. If you tried to do, you know, The Expendables 4 or something now, and you had a bunch of older guys, you might have a problem. But if you were doing some sort of a drama and you had younger people, you probably would have a better chance. We could probably work something out, yeah.
Okay, thanks, man.
You're welcome.
Hey, Greg, quick question. This was something that was brought up in the DJ meeting that I thought was an interesting conversation piece, not really with COVID, but in the event a production does shut down, actor breaks a leg or anything, and we have to take an insurance day, is it better to do a full stop on production, or is it better to try to just manage what you can get and deal with the insurance thing as you keep going?
It's a good question. The rule of thumb typically in those circumstances, what we tell people is you should proceed as if you had no insurance. Because the one thing that the insurance companies hate is circumstances where people move forward assuming that what they're doing is covered by insurance. They look at that as you trying to spend their money before they've agreed to pay the claim. So, you know, it really depends on the circumstances. If you can pull work forward and do it, and in doing so, prove to the insurance company, because keep in mind, the onus of proof is on the claimant, not on the insurance company. But if by pulling work forward, for example, you can demonstrate that you help mitigate costs, then you should do it. If it makes more sense to not have the call because it's going to be more costly to get people on the set, then you shouldn't do it. But I say that the standard rule of thumb is to proceed as if you had no insurance. Even if you do, to proceed as if you didn't.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Time for maybe one more, if we have one more question. If not, happy to wrap it up. Yeah, Peter.
Gotta unmute myself. Hi, this is Pete, representing
Hey, Pete.
Stunts. I was just curious about covering stunts. Is it going to be? Do you foresee any things that's going to throw some hiccups in there, like ensemble as opposed to like 1, 2, 3 people, or is it basically the same as what we're seeing with cast?
Typically, even pre-COVID, stunts weren't automatically covered. Stunts have to be cleared, really pretty much on a case-by-case basis. So if you've got enough stunts in your production where you now employing a stunt coordinator, for example, we usually will talk to the stunt coordinator. We'll start by getting his or her CV. We forward that to the insurance company. If we have your shooting schedule, of course, and we know what you're going to be doing and how, it's a little bit easier. We have stunt questionnaires that need to be completed, believe it or not, for each stunt. So that was going on before COVID. I wouldn't think that would change at all, even during this time or post-COVID. Stunts just fall into a special category and presents a higher degree of risk, and as such, the insurance companies want you to make sure that there's a dialogue that takes place so that if you do have a problem, the insurance company can't come back and say, well, you never told me about that. You know, we don't want to cover that. We would have told you we wouldn't have wanted to cover that. So we usually try to establish a dialogue early before you even start shooting to make sure that they know what you're doing and how you're doing it and that they sign off on it. And I'd say 90% of the time, doesn't cost you any extra money.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are 4 minutes away from 5 o'clock. Greg, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your Thursday afternoon to talk with us. I learned a lot, and I know everyone here is really appreciative of your time. If anyone does want to follow up with you or want to learn more, where do you want to send people? How can they find you? And
if you be kind enough to pass along my email address, yeah. I'm glad to answer any questions. That's what we're here for. We dispense advice freely, even if you don't sign up to be a client. I just think that knowledge is power, and that the more you know, the better of an informed choice you'll make ultimately when you do a project and you do need to hire somebody. Me passing along information doesn't oblige you to hire us, but experience does count. The people who have been doing this for a long time, and there are a few of us, if nothing else, have the kind of relationships with the insurance company people on high levels that we can use, that relationship capital and spend that on your behalf to make things a little bit better for you and make the ride on insurance a little bit smoother.
We really appreciate that. Thank you so much.